Welcome to Kaiser Watch with John Kaiser. I'm your host, Jim Goddard.
Welcome back to the show, John.
Jim, it's good to be back. I was going to talk this week about my Nevada field trip last week, but I have so much material that I decided to save that for next week. Today we're going to talk about several different topics, what's happening in the James Bay area, and a couple of bottom fish that I've been covering through the Kaiser Watch system.
So, John, what's the latest news for the James Bay region?
Well, last week I was pretty excited. The fire closures had been lifted. Everybody was heading back to the field. But then on Monday, we got the bad news that conditions remain dry in the northern part of Quebec, all of the James Bay region, all the way down to the Abitibi, including Val-d'Or, is now still subject to the forest access closure. So that means no boots on the ground, and it's bad news for all the juniors who are planning to go out there. Now, Brunswick Exploration, that was a key topic last week. They had announced the discovery of a 1.7 kilometer long boulder field on the Mirage property, which is in the eastern part of the northern part of the James Bay region. And I thought it was a pretty significant development. The market hasn't thought so. The stock has, in fact, faded down into the low 70s. But that was because the news release was worded in a vague manner, not exactly designed to encourage the market to get all excited. But I was able to talk to Killian Charles today, and he had just returned from the Fast Markets Lithium Conference in Las Vegas that ran from June 20th to 22nd, Tuesday to Thursday. And he added a little bit of flavor to the press release. What intrigued me was their description of a band of spodumene-bearing boulders as big as 6 by 5 meters that stretched along a strike of 1.7 kilometers. And the way they described it as being, it's up ice from where we are, and we have 18 kilometers of property stretching in the up ice direction, so it's just a matter of when we find it. And I sort of said, okay, it looks like if this is down ice from its source, and it's a linear train of boulders, that must mean there's a pegmatite somewhere up ice that's aligned in the same direction as the ice sheet. And that could mean a narrow dike, or it could mean a reasonably wide pegmatite body, but one that does not have much strike. So it was hard to tell from the press release how significant this boulder field. And then they emphasized they have not yet found the bedrock source. They described the boulders as subangular to subrounded, and they provided photographs of it, and they're large, and some of them are quite angular looking. Others are a little bit more rounded, such as the very large ones. But what Killian told me, there were two things that stunned me. One was the band is only 200 meters wide, and the strike is actually perpendicular to the ice direction. And that has very important implications, because if this were truly glacially transported, there would be a dispersal train stretching much farther than 200 meters. And the fact that it's parallel to the ice direction means that the source is also parallel. Now, it could still be a skinny dike, but the abundance and size of the boulders suggests that this is a significant pegmatite body. And I've been complaining about them not providing any geological detail in the graphics accompanying their press releases. And in this case, it was for a reason. I guess if I had called Killian last week, just when I returned from my Nevada trip, he probably wouldn't have said very much, because what they were doing is staking additional ground, and they don't want others to help others figure out the geological context and be in competition. But by now, today, he was reasonably comfortable that they've expanded the land position to what they think covers an entirely new area. Now, what was interesting is they put the boots on the ground, and the team had only 6 hours of time before they had to bug out because of the fire closure. They didn't want to leave. They were so excited. They brought along the geologist who couple of decades ago had found a spodumene boulder in that area. Nobody 2 decades ago cared, but Bob Wares was aware of this and tracked this down and ended up optioning the Globex land position, which is in that area, plus staking a much larger area based on their assessment of satellite imagery and geology and other data. But this was just a report of a single boulder, and they brought this person along to help find them. And they were very surprised at how extensive the boulder field actually was. Even the geologist was very surprised. And interestingly, the geologist by training is a geomorphologist, which is somebody who is expert in how the landscape is formed. So he would know a fair bit about what glaciers do to the landscape, what rivers do, what landslides from mountains do. And this is an area that's quite flat. Typical James Bay. There are no mountains from which boulders would have rolled and settled into some valley, and who knows where they came from. And the orientation of this, they believe they're very close to it, perhaps sitting on it. They did not have time to figure out exactly where the bedrock location is, but the context, the geomorphological context really suggests they have an elongated body that's got spodumene crystals up to 50 centimeters, up to a half meter. This, it's still subject to verification by assays, but this is a potentially significant discovery. The 1.7 kilometer strike of the boulder field, that was just the limit of how much time they had to whack through the bush and figure out where it was before they had to leave. These were literally like kids in a candy store who did not want to leave. Now, can they go back there? Well, Gillian says we are not even going to attempt till mid-July, around July 15th. We do not know how long the closures will last. We have allocated all our resources to other parts of Canada where we have numerous properties that need boots on the ground to figure out whether the pegmatites are LCT type and if there's any scale to them. And even the various contractors in Quebec, they are also preparing to vacate Quebec, northern Quebec, because it's unclear when enough rain will come and stick around to dampen the extremely dry conditions in the James Bay region. But what's really important is that Brunswick is so confident that it is almost sitting on top of a very substantial pegmatite that they have initiated permitting so that they will be in a position to drill in September. And in Quebec, the drill permitting is a little bit more flexible than in other parts of Canada. The area of interest that they've identified, when they finally get their boots in the ground sometime in July or early August to verify where exactly this pegmatite body is, they can adjust the drill locations accordingly. So in their minds, they have finally hit that next goal where we have a sizable first order pegmatite discovery. Again, they still need to confirm the exact location, but the context of this boulder field says there's something extensive, minimum 1.7 kilometers long, who knows how wide, but absolutely loaded with spodumene, which is the key lithium mineral that you want to make your concentrates from. Now, I also asked Killian about what Vegas was like, and he said, well, there were about 1,000 delegates. He went there as a delegate, not as a presenter or exhibitor, and this thing was well attended by government agency people, downstream fabricators and processors, and very importantly, on the supply side, the lithium supply side, it was completely dominated by Australians. And in chatting with these people, these Australians who are doing deals with projects in Canada, they just don't understand why Canadian investors are not embracing this enormous story in their backyard. And they're even shaking their heads more about Bay Street, where the fund managers, the financial community, seems to be largely oblivious to all of this. And I think the problem is the Canadians just haven't figured out how to do the math to understand what a lithium oxide grade means in terms of rock value. And it's very simple. At 1% grade, assuming a $10 a pound lithium carbonate, which is the low end of the recent range, that's the equivalent of 8 to 9 grams per ton gold, or 6% copper. And if you want to be crazy and use 2% and maybe use $20 a pound, you're talking about the equivalent of 25% copper in situ. This is exposed at surface, most of it open pitable. It's in terms of precious and base metal targets in Canada, what's left to be found that's open pitable cannot come close to the grades here. And the Canadians are just going to have to figure out how to do the basic arithmetic to understand how extraordinary this bounty is that I call Lithium Mania 2.0 in their backyard. I don't know when it will happen, but the impression Killian got from the buzz at this conference in Las Vegas is this is not going away. This is growing and growing. And in fact, this week, the U.S. government agreed to loan $9.2 billion to Ford to build battery factories in America. This is not coming to an end. This is not a flash in the pan. This is happening. They're reshoring all this battery production from China, which dominates right now. And where's the lithium going to come from? Well, Canada is the most obvious, reliable source that they can see. Maybe the clay stones in Nevada will provide some, but the Canadian pegmatites, that's going to be what supplies the American battery factories around 2030 and beyond.
What do you make of the latest James Bay acquisitions announced by Dios Exploration?
Well, on June 20th, Dios Exploration put out a press release indicating that it had acquired 3 new claim blocks it calls East Clarkie. Now, this is about 100 kilometers east of where its other blocks are, the Lithium Nord and the Licaron Nord and Sud, or North and South. And this was all based on studying lake bottom sediment data, studying satellite imagery, and also studying glacial history and local geology. And what's really interesting about these claims in this area is it's almost a first-order frontier. Much of the South James Bay area where they have been focused, it has been walked over and looked at, and anything sticking out of the ground like Wabuchi or the Galaxy Sear deposits and the Rose deposits, that was found decades ago and have been advanced to feasibility or even to production stage. So finding other pegmatite bodies in this region is going to be a little bit more difficult. And the approach that Dios has taken, building on its experience with indicator mineral sampling and glacial history of this region when they were focused on diamond exploration, they are developing a surgical acquisition strategy in areas that are not exactly where all those greenstone belt trends were that people explored for base and precious metal deposits, which turn out to also be a great place for lithium pegmatite deposits. This is what Patriot Battery Metals Corvette system is all about. Champion Electric has a parallel trend to the north of the Corvette trend. Brunswick has the western trend called the Plex trend. Those two were, Plex and Corvette, were once part of Virginia's gold hunting exercise in the James Bay region. But what Dios is looking at is areas that weren't exactly in gold base or precious metals hunting territory. So they are using geology to look for where pegmatites might have been emplaced. And when they get their boots in the ground, that may be surprising for everybody, because they may also have first-order discoveries similar to Brunswick marching onto the Mirage project based merely on a report from couple decades ago that spodumene-bearing boulders are found, and then finding this massive pile of field of boulders whose orientation is such that it clearly comes from a substantial source. Now, Dios Exploration has a tenth of the value of Brunswick. It's sort of like the bottom fish in there. Brunswick is a fair spec value rated KRO favorite. But this latest news is very interesting, and they don't really plan to put boots on the ground until middle of July anyways, so they're not missing out on anything. Hopefully we get some more news from them finally on the rest of whatever it is they're working on. But what's interesting about where they have been staking claims, it's kind of like a big hole in the James Bay map where nobody seems to have any claims. And that's always interesting when you have geological ingenuity generating targets in areas where no eyes have ever bothered to look because the ground just wasn't prospective for base or precious metals deposits.
What's causing Tower Resources to perk up in recent days?
Well, about a month ago or so, Tower Resources crashed and burned after it reported the final results from the Thunder Zone drilling on the Rabbit North project in southern British Columbia. That story had been all about this shear zone, a later stage gold-enriched shear zone that Stu Averill was tracking on the basis of gold and till anomalies. And there were high expectations, but the results just didn't support it. It turned out that the final hole that they thought would be the best was actually drilled parallel to what turns out to be the dip of the Thunder Zone, so they never even hit it. But the byproduct that intrigued me from those two drill holes in the southern part of the Thunder Zone target was the unexpected intersection of the Rainbow Zone with copper, moly, and silver grades. And this was intriguing because it was on the edge of an area to the west which is covered by overburden and which has no drill holes in it. And was it possible that there was a blind copper porphyry deposit in this area? And so the company decided to do a geophysical survey to expand the grid to the south from the one that had been done in 2014. And as a result of this survey, they came to understand that, yes, to the west, that is hidden under the overburden is a thin veneer, and to the south, a thin veneer of a much younger Chilcotin basalt flow. And the geophysics has been kind of messed up by it because when the basalt flow erupted, the Earth's polarity was reversed. So even though the basalt is very magnetic, it shows up as a magnetic low rather than a magnetic high. But by doing their depth analysis of the geophysical data, they believe that to the west of the Rainbow Zone intersection is a magnetic high that's sort of masked by the magnetic low from the basalt, which could be indicative of a porphyry system of the magnetite that's generated by the hydrothermal activity related to a porphyry system. So they now have a 250 meter by 900 meter target to the west that could be a blind, significant copper porphyry system, and their goal is to go and drill in there. The geophysical data also help them understand the lineaments associated with the lightning zone and the thunder zone better. Myself, I'm not too optimistic these will amount to much, but I think the porphyry target to the west is a very worthy drill target. And they also have the Durand Creek gold and till sample train, which is to the west of the two that generated the lightning and the thunder zones. They now believe that the source of this is to the north of the Chilcotin basalt, and it's to the west, an area to the west of the magnetite zone where they had a substantial intersection, much better than what they got in the primary in the Rainbow Zone, but the magnetite zone was intersected, below 200 meters of other rocks. So although it was good grade, it never really amounted to a major target. But now they're thinking that that area to the west, and they've done something with the till analysis to make them think this gold, it's different from the orogenic gold type grains associated with the thunder and the lightning zone. It's more associated with a copper gold zone. So the magnetite hole drilled a long time ago, it has gold and copper in it. So this area to the west of the magnetite zone to the north may also be an interesting target worth following up. So from what was originally a copper gold type story, became a gold orogenic gold story. It's now switched back to being a copper gold type story with interesting potential, and it's all undercover, either masked by the Chilcotin basalt flow that's very young, or by overburden in areas that have never been explored. And so when this news came out, the market, which had been pretty bummed out by the disappointment from the Thunder Zone, it has started to pick up, and I still got Tower Resources ranked as a bottom fish, and I think this is now worth paying attention to because orogenic gold zones can be tough to track, whereas if you're into a proper porphyry system, and it's one nobody's ever looked at, there's a possibility that it may be continuous and consistent and a major discovery hidden under not too thick a blanket of overburden and young basalt veneer.
What do the Honeybugle drill results mean for Scandium International?
Well, on June 20th, Scandium International announced the results of a drill program undertaken on the Honeybugle project, which is located about 24 kilometers southwest of the permitted Nyngan project in Australia's New South Wales. Now, they had acquired Honeybugle in 2014 when they were in danger of losing the Nyngan project to Pill Capital, which had foreclosed on its loan and was trying to take the project back. That ended up being saved by a $2.5 million loan from the Evanson brothers, who saw this as a potential, and it was eventually converted into a 20% project stake in Nyngan, which eventually became the largest equity stake in the company. But Honeybugle, they had managed to stake parallel. There was no underlying owner, and they had drilled this, and they had drilled one target area, Seaford. There were 4 anomalies on this property representing 4 different laterite systems that were all indicated by magnetic anomalies. And these had been poked on in past decades, people looking for nickel and platinum group metals, and nothing particularly interesting had ever been found, but the focus had never been on scandium. And what the Nyngan scandium discovery revealed was that in New South Wales, at least, there were these laterite deposits that could have 200 to 600 ppm elemental scandium, which was about 3 to 6 times higher than the best known scandium deposit before that, which was the Softy Vody system that was part of an iron mine in Ukraine. They reported Seaford results, and they were pretty good for the Seaford zone. And in fact, I've done an analysis based on the spacing of just a crude back of the napkin, and that had about 3.7, I could estimate 3.7 million tons of 272 grams for that Seaford zone. But the company never really did anything with it because they said they had Nyngan. Nyngan's got 100 years worth of supply. We can't even get anybody interested in 35 tons per year annual output. So we're not going to do anything with the Honeybugle. But the current situation is one where the Nyngan project, half of it they own the surface rights, the other half they don't. The farmer who owns the land has been a source of trouble for them. They had the mine lease canceled. Then it was reinstated when the government ruled that this is not really farmland that should be protected. But that whole project, it's really ultimately going to be a pilot plant project because the scale of production they proposed in their definitive feasibility study, that'll be 35 tons per annum output. But if the scandium market ever takes off, you want to scale it a lot larger. So I suspect scale this thing bigger by making it modular, Ningen will ultimately be a pilot plant project. Maybe they'll put it into production at that scale, but they'll never grow it to 100 or 150 tons per annum output. And especially if they end up doing a deal with Rio Tinto, which kind of disappointed Scandium International shareholders recently when it paid $14 million to buy out Platina's Owendale project. Now, it has a lot of issues such as water rights that are a problem for that. And it also suggested that it'll be some time before Rio Tinto's in a position to need more scandium. But who knows? They could have a breakthrough and they could want something to happen quickly. And the new Scandium International management team, which replaced Willem Divestein and George Putnam April last year, and then did a $3.5 million financing at 9 cents with a full 5-year warrant. They might want to do a deal with Rio Tinto, and such a deal is probably not going to be a good one. However, because of Honeybugle, that they could retain 100%. So going in there and doing more drilling, that's very important. And what's interesting is the press release indicated a number of holes from 2016 and 2018. And SCY has never disclosed that it ever did any drilling beyond what it did in 2014. And when you look at the drill pattern from 2018, which were a series of holes number 37 to 60, it's kind of like a real sort of like a walk of a drunken sailor trying to find a bar that's still open after everything has closed. But within that pattern, there were some high-grade numbers. When you look at what was done this year, it starts at the southern end and it marches north on 50-meter centers along the lines and fills in the gaps from the holes before and pretty much outlines a nice 350 by 400 meter body that's enriched. And they provided enough data so that I could go in there and pick out the holes that are 200 ppm scandium or better, and just do a sort of a block calculation using each one as a 50 by 50 meter square, ultimately 100 by 100, and added them all up with a 1.9 specific gravity, and I come up with roughly 1.2 million tons of material. And this is all between 1 to 4 meters of overburden. The average grade is between 9 and 10 meters. So this is a slab of scandium enrichment, and the average grade for this sort of 1.2 million ton footprint is 394 ppm, which if you convert that into scandium oxide, that works, and do $2,000 a kilo as a price. That's $1,200 rock, or 1.5 billion in situ that this little Air Core program of 32 holes has outlined. And the market doesn't know how to do the math on this, so it has pretty much ignored this. But I believe the spacing of this will be sufficient to produce a resource estimate. And so in situ, that's about 725 tons of scandium oxide. Now again, this is back of the napkin calculation. The formal doing would end up being different, but the material they intersected is limonite, which is what is targeted for mining at Ningen. Beneath this, there's also a saprolite horizon. It turns out to be thinner than the limonite. In case of Ningen, it's actually thicker, but it appears to be at least 200 ppm scandium also, and might eventually represent a significant additional resource for this area. They have two other targets that apparently have not been tested. Seaford was the one they tested in 2014. Now they have the Woodlong target that they've identified with the resource. So the stage is now set that after they build something on Ningen, if the scandium market continues to take off, the the Honeybugle project could be developed at a much bigger scale when they know there is the offtake. And of course, we're still dealing with this chicken and egg problem, and that the world has done pretty much without scandium for a long time, which is the ideal marriage partner for aluminum, and can continue to do so. It's not critical really for anything, but should a reliable supply at a stable price emerge, then there would end up being offtake demand growth. So it's very speculative in that it's an element that's not really used by the world. There's plenty of uses, and Rio Tinto is working on building out the offtake market. If you can get it to over 50 tons per annum, well, it's going to be the leader. But by having Honeybugle delineated like this and ready for a resource estimate, they haven't said they will do one, but the data is now there to do one. The company can present itself to somebody other than Rio Tinto who might be interested in getting involved in a reliable supply of scandium that can be scaled larger over time.
John, thank you so much for the update.
You're welcome, Jim.
I'm Jim Goddard.
Comments made on Kaiser Watch are an expression of opinion only and should not be construed in any manner whatsoever as a recommendation to buy or sell any financial instrument at any time. Archived online at kaiserresearch.com.